good morning there, sweet peas. Basic prepper mom Myra. Haven't been on here in a while, but just been super crazy busy. And to be quite honest, I get very overwhelmed very easily nowadays. And it's so easy to do, and I think I've kind of talked about this before, touch base on it, where when you are trying to keep abreast as to what is going on in the world, it gets very overwhelming. Well, I kind of overwhelmed myself this weekend. We had got a new storage shed, and it's a tough shed, so it's kind of got two. It's got like a loft area and then down below a while ago, a few months ago. And so the old shed that we had that came with the house is literally falling apart. The roof has about 3 tarps on it. It leaks like crazy, so we had to get most of our stuff out to protect it better. Well, we've been so busy and just a lot of stuff going on that we've just kind of been throwing stuff into the shed. And I got to the point where you couldn't even walk in it. And I was like, I can't do this. And when I purge, I definitely purge. And that's what I felt that I needed to do. Make more space, cut down your clutter, and make more space for things that serve you, for things that have a purpose for being there. And I had a lot of stuff that just did not have a purpose, didn't have a memory attached to it, didn't have whatever the situation. So I ended up taking kind of a car full of stuff over to donate, which was amazing. I still have more stuff to go through, but when it's 98 degrees out and the loft area is probably about 130 up there, you can only do so much for so long before you get exhausted and have to just go inside and do nothing for a while, which is what I did. But I did get a lot accomplished. Now, in doing so, I had realized that a lot of my stocks, a lot of my stores kind of had the same thing going. We just kind of threw it in there. Didn't really have, at the very beginning, I was really good about stuff. I absolutely was good about labeling things, storing things properly, knowing where everything is. But then it got to a point where I was just stocking up, storing up, and throwing stuff into the shed and just saying I'll deal with it later. Well, later kind of never came. And before I knew it, we were in a situation where it was just all over the place. Now, having done that, sorry, I have a hair that is refusing to leave there we go, sorry. In doing that, unfortunately, what I found is that some of my stocks and stores were not stored properly and were no good. So I had to end up throwing a few things out, fed a few things to the animals, what they would eat. But for the most part, sadly, I did not take my own advice and I ended up losing some of my stuff. So it's a good thing that I went through it, but kind of a bad thing because I found myself very overwhelmed and very upset that I had not done things properly in the first place. And I think that is a really good lesson, that if we know we're going to do something, if we know that we're going to be stocking up, storing up, if we're going to be breaking down things, putting them in Mylar bags or canning or freeze drying, whatever the situation, take the time at that moment and store them properly. Don't just throw stuff around and go, I'll get to it later, because first of all, by the time later comes, it could be weeks or months down the road, and then you've had all of that go to waste. Second of all, if you put it off, then you lose track of what you actually have. That's another thing. You lose track of what you actually have. At the beginning, I was super good. I had a checklist, wrote everything down, had basically an inventory list, inventory spreadsheet of everything that I had. And at the beginning, I was super good about keeping up on that and making sure to update it every time I added something. And over the year or so, I have not done that. So I honestly lost track of what I did have. And that doesn't help anybody. So make sure that you take the time and store things properly. Make sure that you take the time to do things the way that they're supposed to do and store them correctly, because otherwise you are going to just waste what you have stored up. Or when an emergency does come, that stuff is not going to be any good anymore and you can't use it, so it does nobody any good. There was a story that a few of the people that I follow were talking about, and I thought, I haven't heard of it, it's kind of weird, so I looked it up. And it was about a family in Colorado. And the only thing that I had heard, it was a family in Colorado that decided they were going to live off the grid in Colorado. They watched some YouTube videos and went up there and ended up perishing. That's all the information I had. I thought, there's got to be something more to this story. And there was a little bit, but I'm like, yeah, there's got to be something more. That just doesn't sound right. So I looked into the story, and apparently it was a mom who was like 42 years old, her 14-year-old son, and her sister who was 40 or 41. They had watched some YouTube videos and the mom decided that, this world is just going to crap. I can't do it anymore. I can't raise my kid in it. We're going to go up in the mountains. We're going to live off grid. It's going to be fine. They watched a few YouTube videos on survival skills and how to live off grid. They ended up it was a weird situation because I don't know, they said they didn't have a car, which I was like, okay. So I don't know if they drove somewhere and then parked the car and hiked everything in, if they had somebody drop them off, if they just, I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation. But they ended up finding them, and I guess the family tried to talk them out of it, and they were just dead set on it. The family found them. One had perished outside of the tent, and two had perished inside of the tent. Now, I say tent because apparently all they had was a few canned goods that they brought with them, a few food items, a tent, some books on survival, and that's pretty much about it. They had evidence where they were in the process of building a lean-to, but they had no, which I thought this was interesting in the article that they noted. They had no, I didn't have anything. They didn't have any firearms. They didn't have a lot of stuff, but they didn't have firearms. It looked like they had built a fire, or they were trying to build a fire, or they had built a fire inside their tent to try to keep warm because they went up there during the summertime. Well, as you know, we had a really hard winter all around. Like a lot of people had hard winters, and they had a lot of snow up there. So they weren't sure if they had perished from malnutrition, from the freezing temperatures, or from carbon monoxide from them trying to start a fire in the tent. They weren't sure. I'm not sure if they're gonna do an autopsy or not. I'm not sure, but they had been gone for a while. And I thought it interesting that, first of all, you're going to go live out in the middle of the mountains or the forest or whatever with no firearm, because not only do you not have protection against the wildlife that's out there, but now you don't have something to hunt with to be able to provide food. And if the only food that you brought with you for the three of you were a few canned goods that you could carry on your backs to pack in there, it's not very preparedness of you. Just watching a few videos, reading a few books is not going to prepare you for what is coming ahead. And I think this is a super good lesson for all of us. Just because you think that you're prepared, you're probably not for what's coming down the road. So if you are stocking up, you're storing up, you're doing everything you can, and then all of a sudden you get to a point where you go, you know what, I'm good. We're just going to stop right there. I've got medication, I've got water, I've got food. Yeah, we're good for a while. Don't stop stocking up. Don't stop preparing, because you don't know what's coming down the line. And I guarantee you that they probably didn't realize that it was going to be a very difficult winter. They didn't realize what it takes to live through a winter out in the mountains, out in the forest, up in higher elevation. They were not prepared for what was coming down the line. And we need to be prepared for what's coming down the line. So I absolutely 100% believe in thinking about worst case scenario. think about your worst case scenario and prepare for that. That's what you shoot for. That's what you prepare for, the worst case scenario. Because if that worst case scenario never happens, at least you are still prepared on a larger scale. Okay? Prepare for worst case scenario. Continue to stock up, continue to prepare. Food, medication, water. Not just medication, but I want you to prepare with first aid supplies. Simple first aid supplies. Bandages, Band-Aids, peroxide, rubbing alcohol, triple antibiotic ointment. Those are kind of the basis or the basics of first aid. There's a lot you can do with that in different areas, but definitely continue to prepare and stock up. Just when you think you have enough, buy a little bit more. So every time you're out and about, get one item to bring back. And then when you have your pantry built up, when you're stocking and storing, you should be rotating it. So your stocking and your storing of stuff should be like your own grocery store. So if you have 100 cans of beans and corn and whatever, when you're cooking your dinners, when you're going through your meal, you go to that and you get out of that what you would use. Then you replenish that back up. So your pantry, it should be a working pantry. You should be continually going through it. And as you're using it, stocking and storing. And as you're replenishing it, if you use 3 cans of corn, the next time you go to the store, buy 4 cans of corn because you had an extra in there. If you have a recipe where it calls for 2 cans of green beans, the next time you go to the store, you're going to buy 3 cans of green beans. And that way you're constantly replenishing, but you're also replenishing and adding a little bit. And that extra 50 cents a can is going to make a difference. So, and that's kind of how you work through your pantry. Flour, rice, beans, kind of the same thing. Although rice we hear is going to go up tremendously in price, tremendously. If it hasn't already, it probably has already. I haven't bought rice in a little while, but I'm going to do that. And what I'm going to do with rice is very versatile. So if you have rice, you could make a meal out of anything. Add rice to it. Rice is a great carb. It's a great filler. You can use it for a lot of different things. You could cook it and feed it to there's animals that'll eat it too. So, dogs, chickens, will eat rice as well. So it's a great bartering tool as well. If somebody is in a situation where they need food, rice and beans, amazing bartering tool. You can barter a half a pound or a pound of rice or beans, and it really doesn't affect you that much if you're stocked and stored. So they've got 5-gallon buckets, food grade buckets with those screw on lids that are all food grade. They also have the little 2-gallon buckets, which I really like those as well. But what I would do is get you the 5-gallon buckets, line it with Mylar bags, they'd make big giant 5-gallon Mylar bags, or smaller Mylar bags, and put your rice in there, put them in the food grade buckets and seal them up, and those should last for quite a while. Beans are the same way. You can do the same thing with beans, but definitely stock up and store up. Rice, I think, is one of those commodities that is going to be very, in very high demand. So, and like I said, prices are going to continue to skyrocket. There's reports saying that we are going to see inflation continue to rise or top off at a very high level for the next 2 years. There will be no relief from inflation at least for 2 more years. That's what they're predicting, which means everything is going to continue to go up in price. So that's what I have to talk about today. Once again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out. Hope you guys have a wonderful, amazing day, and we'll talk to you later. Have a great day.